layers. You may have cake layers that aren't even, things like that. When I go to cut a cake, I'm going to first take the top off. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make a score line all the way around the top with my knife. You notice my knife is staying still. Then I slowly start working my way into the center with my knife. As soon as I've made it all the way around that cake. Once I turn it around and around and I finally reach the center, the top is now free from the cake. Then from there I can get a couple more layers. I make my layers fairly thin, so my layers are approximately almost 3/4 of an inch thick. This cake is still quite warm, so I really should let it cool more. I'm trying to be careful here. What the key here is holding your knife level, really level, and that's the hard part for a lot of people. So go for another layer. Yeah, this cake's really delicate. If this cake was cold and had chilled, it would be a lot easier to cut. But you'll notice I've really used the knife. I'm not putting any pressure on this knife at all. I'm just sort of guiding the knife where I want it to go. And I'm finding the draw stroke, the stroke where I'm going toward myself, works a lot better than pushing forward. So I'm not really pushing forward much. I'm just working my knife slowly toward the center so I can make that cake completely separate from the next layer. There we go. Now, as I say, the cake is quite delicate at this point. Grab another circle over the way. I'm going to go ahead and just, I'll separate these layers. I can't just lift this because the cake will just fall apart. So in order to make sure that I can support this, I'm just going to use a cardboard to help support that layer, so I'm not going to end up breaking. If I was building a cake with this, what I would do then is this cake would stay on the cardboard. I would go ahead and soak it with simple syrup. I'd put on some icing. The next layer goes on, soak it with simple syrup again. So each layer is only a little bit, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. And it just allows me to soak it down and get it moistened. So simple syrup is something that doesn't act as a sauce necessarily. It's very thin. All it's designed to do is go down into the cake. Sort of like when you put Jell-O on a cake and it's really liquid at that point, it soaks right in. This will do the same thing. If I was building this cake with icing, then I would just go ahead and put my next layer on, for example, carefully removing the cardboard and making sure my cake sits level and sits even. Now, we still have a crust on the outside. And typically, when you build a cake, what you're also doing is you're removing all the crust. When you're making a sandwich for a 5-year-old, they can't stand the crust. So what do? You cut the crust off. Lest the child will cry, right? So what I do in order to do that is I just remove the crust. And again, no pressure with the knife. I'm just using the teeth of the knife to do the job for me. Let the knife do all the work. And you notice I'm using my whole hand. I have a glove on, but I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just holding it in place so the cake doesn't move when I'm trying to cut it. Because if it moves around too much, it's going to cause my cut to be uneven. I don't want uneven cuts. So I just use my hand as a stabilizer. No pressure. Now if I was going to ice this cake, let's say with buttercream or whipped cream, the first thing I'm going to do here is clean up. Got to get rid of some of these crumbs. The one thing about building a cake is you don't want to have any crumbs in your icing. You just want to have clean looking icing. In order to get that, you're going to have to make sure that you keep those crumbs under control. And as we get into November, I think you're going to find in future weeks when we do our cake building class that we go over this again. We'll spend some time just learning how to keep our crumbs under control, how to go about building the cake in the classic way so that you'll be able to know how to do it the way the professionals do it. When you see all those specials on the Food Network and you see all those people building cakes, they follow these methods because it's the way to do it to make sure that you're going to get the results that you're looking for. But this is typical of a starting stage here. Clean, free of any crust. We'll get the last of the crumbs off the turntable. Crumbs are one of those things. If you see a new cake, you go to a cake shop, see a cake in the window, and it's got crumbs in the crust. What does it tell you?
Piss poor job.
Yeah, piss poor job. You know, someone wasn't attentive to detail. They weren't watching. They weren't using a clean station. Well, if they weren't using a clean station, what does it say about them?
Dirty people.
Dirty people. Maybe they didn't wash their hands. God forbid they went to the bathroom and they didn't wash their hands. Who knows what kind of unsanitary people these are? These are the kind of thoughts that start going through your mind, especially people that are very concerned about such things. So, you know, all it takes is seeing crumbs in your icing for them to start thinking that way. But we know better, right? We're not unsanitary. We wash our hands. We're very well groomed. We take care of our workspace. But we lost track of a few crumbs, and that's what happens. It starts leading to people starting to get paranoid about what kind of a preparation you're doing at that cake shop. So that's one of the reasons I'm very concerned about crumbs, making sure that I keep them under control. So the outside of my cake looks as clean as it possibly can, and it says a lot to your professionalism. So let me make sure our cake looks good.
Isn't that why a lot of bakeries crumb coat?
That's just a really quick.
Isn't that why a lot of bakeries do a crumb coat where they
Yes.
actually do the final icing?
If I was going to ice this, I'd be putting icing in the middle here, and then I'd put a crumb coat on. That crumb coat is just for one reason only. It's a thin coat of buttercream just to contain the crumbs, just to keep them stuck to the cake, and not where you don't want them to be. So a crumb coat does a very good job of that. It does. It keeps the crumbs under control, glues them down. Now you can put on your second coat, and it gives you a nice clean finished coat of icing. Yeah, crumb coating is a great way to keep them under control. I know some bakeries don't use them. They just whip it out. They get that first coat on, and they're so good at controlling them they can actually keep their crumbs under control enough that nobody notices them. But that's rare. I still use a crumb coat myself.